Right, so in this video, I want to talk about an interesting question. And the question is, what is the future interface for us as digital strategists and web developers? And maybe I'm running an agency, NetNode in Switzerland. And obviously, we are super interested in how the future of the interface evolves. And so there were a couple of tweets and information going around on the internet I want to comment on, which is probably a look into how the future of the UI looks like. So yeah, this video is less of a showcase of a specific tool or whatever. It's more like thinking out loud what's on my mind about where we are heading. And yeah, again, so what is it all about? And actually, this post here I have open here from Tariq, which is, as I remember, a employee of Anthropic. It went quite viral in the last days. So this one is published on 8th May 2026. And yeah, the question is Markdown still relevant if we can use HTML as a information holder as well as a presentation of information. And I want to go through this article and then also show one case that also went viral in the last weeks on how potentially the UI will shift in the future. But let's start with that. So the unreasonable effectiveness of HTML using Claude Code, the unreasonable effectiveness of HTML Markdown has become the dominant file format used by agents to communicate with us. It's simple, portable, has some rich text capability, and is easy for you to edit. Claude has even gotten surprisingly good at using ASCII to make diagrams inside Markdown files. Yeah, this is something we all know. I mean, we use LLMs all day long. And yes, Markdown is a very portable, simple format. And it also allows the LLMs with tools to basically not only look at the full Markdown, but actually most likely have a front matter at the top with some meta information, as well as you can very easily skim through headlines, for example. You can identify links very quickly with little grabs or with little searches inside these files. So yeah, Markdown is the dominant file format. I fully agree with that. But as agents have become more and more powerful, I have felt that Markdown has become a restricting format. I find it difficult to read a Markdown file of more than 100 lines. I want richer visualizations, color and diagrams, and I want to be able to share them easily. Yes, I also feel that. Obviously, if you work with Claude Code on the command line, inside the command line, you cannot render HTML, and this is obviously one of the limitations you get out of it. But let's see what he's up to. I'm also increasingly not editing these files myself, but using them as specs, reference files, brainstorming outputs, etc. When I do make edits, I usually prompt Claude to edit them, which removes one of the Markdown's largest benefits. I also agree that it's interesting that I do basically the same. I mostly use my chat window to do the edits, not because I'm lazy to edit the Markdown file itself, but actually my main issue about editing Markdown files or whatever files, even code files myself, is that the LLM lose track of these changes, right? So whenever I do a little change in the file, the LLM has to reload this context it's understanding my change, right? So, but yeah, obviously Markdown was also invented to have a lightweight format for editing. And so it's certainly much easier to edit than HTML and other formats for, let's say, regular use. But yeah, so let's see how it goes on. I've started preferring HTML as an output format instead of Markdown, and increasingly see this being used by others on Claude Code team. This is why. Okay. If you want to start with some examples, you can see a bunch here. Just be sure to come back and read more about it. Let's quickly open that up. All right, so yeah, it's just more information. Let's maybe dive into that in a minute, but let's first go through the article. Why HTML? Well, it's about information density. What you get in HTML, I mean, you also get that with Markdown partially, tables, you have color type, spacing, you have illustrations, you have code highlighted snippets, you have interaction, you have workflows, you have spatial capabilities, and you can also embed images. I mean, some of them you can also do with markdown, that's for sure. But what you get is obviously more design features and more interactive abilities. And especially if you obviously extend HTML with JavaScript, then you can build basically rich applications, right? HTML can convey much richer information compared to Markdown. It can, of course, do simple document structures like header formatting, but it can also represent all sorts of information such as tabular data using tables, design data with CSS, illustrations with SVG, code snippets with script tags, interaction using HTML elements with JavaScript and CSS, workflows using SVG and HTML, spatial data using absolute positions and canvases, images using the image tag, of course also video, etc., etc. I will go as far as to say that there is almost no set of information that Claude can read that you cannot fairly efficiently represent HTML. This makes it a highly efficient way for the model to communicate in-depth information to you and for you to review it. Typo. I found that the absence of being able to do this, the model may do more inefficient things in Markdown, like ASCII diagrams, my favorite, estimating colors with Unicode characters like this in the screenshot from Claude Code. So it seems that the LLM models try to kind of break out of the Markdown limitations. So they built these ASCII diagrams as well as kind of color palettes, obviously in a very, very limited way. But it's just interesting to see that information wants to hold high density, and as this article says, Markdown cannot hold enough density anymore, probably. Also, visual clarity and ease of reading. So you have the Markdown file, and then you have the HTML. Obviously, it's the same information, but in HTML you have a much richer experience, much richer, basically UI to present that information, and just like a linear block of text. As Claude is able to do more complex work, it's also writing larger and larger specs and plans. In practice, I found I tend to not actually read more than 100-line Markdown file, and I certainly am not able to get anyone else in my organization to read it. But HTML documents are much easier to read. Claude can organize the structure visually to be ideal to navigate with tabs, illustration, links, etc. It can even be more responsive, so you can read it differently based on your form factor. Ease of sharing. Markdown files are very hard to share since most browsers do not render them natively well. You often have to add them as attachments to emails or messages. I actually like this thinking, and it's true that a Markdown file is a text file, so it's actually easily to share, but then actually view it if you are not in a IDE and you don't have a Markdown viewer or something like that. It's actually quite hard to consume. I would agree. Even if, let's say, if I would send a Markdown file to my clients, they say, what is this document? I cannot read at it. But if I send an HTML document, they probably double click it, the browser will open, and then you can easily consume that information. So that's a fair and a very important and relevant point, actually. With HTML, as long as you upload the file, for example, to S3, you can share the link easily. Your colleagues can open it wherever they wish and easily reference it. Yeah, referencing is also interesting. I mean, okay, this is also true for Markdown files. Obviously, once it's available on a URL, then you can share that link and you can reference it. The chance of someone actually reading your spec, report, or PR write-up is much bigger, much higher if it's in HTML. Yes, okay, that's the pitch. Two-way interaction. HTML can allow you to interact with the document. For example, you might want to ask it to add sliders or knobs to adjust a design, or allow to tweak different options in the algorithm to see what happens. You can also ask it to let you copy these changes into a prompt to paste back into Claude Code. All right. Yeah, I mean, okay, now I think it's a bit leaving this notion of information density. I kind of agree that obviously you can then build interactive stuff, send back some context again into the model, and it will update HTML document. Okay, you cannot do that with Markdown, but that's not the purpose of Markdown per se. But I see in that context that you likely want to have a more interactive kind of UI information presentation in the context of working with LLMS. So that's totally valid, I would say. Data ingestion, why use Claude Code to make HTML files instead of Claude AI or Claude Design, for example? One of the biggest reasons is all the context Claude Code can ingest. For example, in writing this article, I asked Claude Code to read through my code folder and find all the HTML files I've generated, group and categorize them, and then make an HTML file with all the diagrams representing each type. The diagrams you see in the article are direct results of that. Besides the file system, Claude Code can find additional context using your MCPs like Slack, Linear, your web browser with Claude in Chrome, your Git history, etc. Yeah, okay, but this is also true for Markdown files. Okay, it's more about why use Claude Code than maybe Claude Design, etc. Obviously, you have access to the file system. Okay, that's fair enough. It's joyful. Making HTML documents with Claude is just more fun and makes me feel more involved and invested in the creation, and that by itself is enough. Yes, I also feel that. So writing Markdown files is not fun, and if you have a more interactive output, which is even playful, it's more fun. That's for sure. Even though I have to say I still like Markdown files or just like linear portions of information. For example, in our ticketing system, we call it the roadmap worker system, we only store the context information, specifications, etc., as linear information in a Markdown format, or even it's actually HTML, but it's not the goal to have interactive HTML, etc., but to have a very clear specification of how a specification is built and structured. So, of course, depending on the use case, you want to have it a bit more joyful, and on the other side, you want basically a free form structure, but still have this linear presentation of information, so it's easy to consume and you always know where to look at. So how to get started? I'm a little bit afraid that people will read this article and turn it into a HTML skill or something. While there might be some value in that, I want to emphasize that you don't need to do much to get Claude to do this. You can just ask it to make an HTML file or make an HTML artifact. The trick is knowing what you want the artifact to do and how you might use it. You may over time make a skill, but for now I suggest just prompting from scratch to get a hang of how to use it in different cases. All right, use cases. To make this more concrete, I've made many different HTML files for different use cases. You can view them, all of them here, but here's an overview. Let's quickly open that up. I think it's the same page I opened up before. Okay, so here are a couple of examples. Let's just pick one. All right, there. Okay, so this is an exploration Birchline web client. So this seems to be a result of 3 different approaches. So this was the prompt. Show me 3 different ways to implement debounced search for the task filter input in our React code base with trade-offs for each. So you have then the example, how you would do it, and then pros and cons, including some aspects in it, and then it makes a recommendation. I really like this example because it's clearly very well structured. You see the problem, you see the solutions with some thinking in it, and then a clear recommendation. Certainly much better than the recommendation I typically get when I'm in the CLI. I kind of like that, even though I have to say that the ergonomics, as at least as of now, how we do it inside Claude Code, is also not solved in a good way. So now when I use Claude Code on the CLI, I'm obviously in an ASCII environment, and then I don't want to let the AI create an HTML document, and I have to look it up in a IDE, double click it, and then it opens up another browser window somewhere, and then I go back. So I also lose kind of the context, even though if I want to kind of prepare a presentation or even bring it to a meeting, this is certainly a very interesting use case in Artifact. I like this example. Let's pick another one, code review and understanding, PR write-up for reviewers. So write up PR for my reviews, explain the motivation, walk them through the change file by file, blah, blah, blah. So it's basically a more visual way to give a PR review. And then so basically it goes through file by file. All right, so it's in the sense very interactive, and it's just where to focus your review, test plan. All right. Yeah, okay, maybe I didn't fully get that, but I mean, the review workflow, I think obviously you also do that using AI tools. But when I do a code review, I really like to think through it as a human, and then, also exactly give the comment there, want to mention the comment there, and, assign the user to it. I don't exactly get that example. Maybe I'm just not fully understanding what it is, but let's maybe go and check another one. Clickable flow, for example. So, okay, sidebar, drag to order. Throw away HTML so we can fill the reorder before porting it to React. Okay, so this is more like a prototype of a specific interaction to demo it. And, well, for sure, you cannot deliver that through Markdown. And here you just have a little experiment and actually how that feels natively in the browser. And then also what you're feeling, design decisions baked into these prototypes so you can push back on them. So yeah, it's really about this subtle, feel of when you, drop it and the droppable zone, etc. So this is also interesting. It's also when I pull it, the initial position still stays. So now we can really argue about it. Does it feel right? Instead of kind of polluting the real code base. Yeah, okay. I mean, this is certainly not possible with Markdown. Why not use that in a daily workflow? I mean, sometimes we do similar things with our clients where we bring up an idea and then typically we work with Next.js or whatever framework. And then we just make a route and add some components, some demo prototype components, and show it on the real application. So, and obviously in the future, we might do that through simple HTML documents. Yeah, I mean, if you already have a running code base, you can do a branch, and then you have a feature branch where you can share even a URL where you can then demo it. So yeah, but certainly for prototyping, this is obviously a very, very powerful example as well. Yeah, let's use some illustrations. What happens when you git push? So let's say if you want to explain a concept, and then this is very visual, and instead of using whatever library, Mermaid or however they are called, why not just let the LLM generate a flow diagram? And then you can clearly explain in a very visual way this concept. And this is not doable with Markdown or with just this kind of ASCII schema kind of way of explaining things. Certainly a very powerful concept. Yeah, I like that. Okay, then you can also do decks. Yeah, this is something I did many times in the past as well. Just ad hoc presentations, basically decks to explain certain concepts. And I mean, not only this is super practical because you can straight out of your, let's say, research workflow, whatever, you can generate a presentation which is highly interactive, visually appealing, and this is certainly not doable with Markdown, right? So, okay, so we saw a couple of examples, use cases, and maybe I jump over them because we already saw them. Specs, planning, exploration, yeah, we had that. Code review, okay, we also discussed that. Design prototypes, we haven't discussed that yet, but let's quickly do that because I'm actually curious what the demo is here. Living design systems. So yeah, generated from tokens and components. All right, so I see. So instead of using a storybook kind of design system documentation, you can just generate a straight up simple HTML document, which is then the Birchline design system in this case. And then you have all the colors, and then you have the typography, and then you have the spacing, and all that in one simple design system document. Why go with Markdown if you can do that with that? And this is certainly easily consumable by humans as well as by the agent. Okay, cool. So we had that reports, research. All right, so there are a couple of things. Then, yeah, it's not only about presenting, but it's also about editing interfaces. So custom editing interfaces. Sometimes it's hard to describe what you want purely in a text box. In this case, I'll ask Claude to build me a throwaway editor for the exact thing I'm working on. Not a product or a reusable tool, but a single HTML file purpose-built for this one piece of data. The trick is always to end up with an export, a copy as JSON or copy as prompt, button to turn whatever I did in the UI back into something I can paste into Claude Code. Yeah, I really like this catch. Sometimes I did that in the past, but it's certainly inspiring to do that a bit more conscious. And it's really about this throwaway editor. And it's true, sometimes you cannot really describe what you want, but you have it in mind. So you want to get that feel. So why not just expose the different variables in a simple editor? You can play around until you have this feel you want to see, and then you copy back that, and then you remove the editor again. I really like that. Example prompts. I need a prioritize these 30 linear tickets, make me an HTML file which each ticket has a draggable card across now, next, later, cut columns, pre-sort them by your best guess, add a copy as markdown button that exports the final ordering in one line, rational per bucket. Here's our feature flag config, build a form-based editor for it. Group flags by area, show dependencies between them, warn me if I enable a flag whose prerequisite is off, add a copy div, but that gives me just the change key. Okay, so yeah, I see. So this is not only about, changing some visual stuff, but actually based on an existing information, build a UI that, references the inner logic or the inner kind of dependencies together. And for me as a human give me a very visual and easy to consume and advanced UI basically to work on, instead of just, going through 30 tickets and kind of get the context. You have this little just in place editor. So it's a very valid use case. I'm turning the system prompt, make a side-by-side editor prompt on the left with the variable slot highlighted, 3 sample inputs on the right that re-render the field template live at the character token counter and a copy button. Yeah, it's interesting. So frequently asked questions about HTML as a rich information holder. I've been telling many people how I switched to HTML, and I've seen a few repeated question. Isn't it less token efficient? While Markdown often uses fewer tokens, I found that added expressiveness of HTML and a much higher likelihood of me reading it means, I clicked the back button on my mouse. So I was here. So while Markdown often uses fewer tokens, I found that the added expressiveness of HTML and the much higher likelihood of me reading it means I get overall better output. With the 1 million context window of Opus 4.7, the increased token usage is not really noticeable in the context window. I would agree here. I like this notion of, okay, what's the purpose of actually creating a Markdown file if you anyway never read it again? Instead of then actually saying, okay, let's really think through the presentation or the artifact out of it, which then is a true shareable and a true kind of memory piece of information which you look up again in the past because it's playful, because it's information dense, and then this additional cost of additional tokens is way worth it. When you do use Markdown for now, I have honestly stopped using Markdown altogether for almost everything, but I'm probably far on the HTML maximalist side of things. How do I view the HTML file? That's a good question. I tend to just open it in a browser locally. You can ask Claude to open it or upload it to S3 if you want a shareable link. Okay, so he kind of just teaches Claude to open it. Depending on your IDE, it's anyway opening it up in the same application basically in a little browser engine. So you don't have to, open up a Chrome browser, which is then in a complete different window, and then you lose context anyway. Doesn't this take longer to generate than Markdown? This takes longer. HTML can take 2 to 4 times longer than Markdown, but I found the results are worth it. So it's kind of the same thing as at the top. What about version control? This is honestly one of the biggest downsides of HTML. HTML diffs are noisy and hard to review compared to Markdown, right? How do I get Claude to match my style, not make it ugly? The front-end design plugin helps Claude make good HTML files. But to match your own company style, you can create a single design system HTML file by pointing Claude at your code base. You can then use the design system file as a reference for the HTML files. Yeah, this is a good catch. We actually did that also in the past, that we have some kind of template which defines let's say the little header and also a little footer. And then because it's a single file, it already has some CSS in it, and it just catches up or takes up these existing styles, and then you have kind of a branded HTML output based on your LLMs, which is actually quite powerful. Stay in the loop. All of the above is to say that I think the real reason I use HTML is that I feel much more in the loop with Claude. I had begun to fear that because I had stopped reading plans in depth, I would simply have to leave Claude to make its choices. But I'm happy to say instead that I feel more in the loop than ever before when using HTML. I hope you do too. Okay, so that was the article, the unreasonable effectiveness of HTML with increased information density. And yeah, just to come back with my initial topic of this video, actually, it's what is the future of interface? So while this article is more about personal, let's say, productivity inside Claude Code, we can take this as an early version of how we might gonna consume content in the future, which is you have a interface you use. It could be voice, it could be your smartphone, it could be your desktop computer, it could be whatever. And instead of having a predefined UI, which is done by a team or product team that builds this interaction, the system you interact is basically generating HTML documents out of the box, specifically and uniquely for you. And interestingly, HTML is so powerful. So it's not only showing, nice typography. It can generate, it can hold images, videos, etc. So why not think about a future where once you open up your, your agent, whatever interface it is, it basically is a stream of a ongoing fresh generation of HTML or maybe a video, which is then now something I also want to present, which went viral in the past weeks. So you can even go a step further. So let's say, okay, we had ASCII output as markdown files, which is linear information with some, structure in it. Then you have HTML where you can build much, much high rich interactivity. But then why not go there and say why we don't use the visual UI and make it very, very interactive. And so this post went viral, so 5.7 million, and make it bigger. So what holds us back to actually create a kind of, it's not a video, it's more like an infographic, and this is about a Paris travel overview. And instead of even generating text or HTML documents, you could create on-the-fly animations, images, and each of the pieces on that additional image is then again interactive. So instead of kind of creating links in HTML, you just make every pixel and the context around that pixel interactive, which then helps you to consume information. So that's a very interesting concept. They have a couple of other demos here. To be honest, I'm not sure if these are actually real if these are it's a real experience or if it's just a made-up prototype. I couldn't find that out, but it's just interesting to see how a future UI could become live. And so, if you are a digital strategist or a web developer, this would completely clear out our existing kind of work. Because here, everything is created on the fly, right? And everything is personalized or hyper-personalized. Very likely, this information is already part of the LLM, so you don't even need basically a knowledge hub. Obviously, if you want an interaction with the real world, let's say if you want to create a shop experience like that, you need a database with your custom information, but nothing stops you to do that. Yeah, I think it's just interesting to see how the UI could evolve. And I just wanted to share that. There is actually also one post which was published by Andrei Karpathy, which I quickly want to read through because it goes in the same direction. So it's actually an answer to this article we went through just now. And this works really well. By the way, at the end of your query, ask your LLM to structure your responses as HTML. Then view the generated file in your browser. I've also had some success asking the LLM to present its output as slideshows. So this is more or less what we saw in the article. And why not do that on a session you did? You made your whatever, you made your work, and then just to summarize it and to make a structure your response as HTML. Why not? You can try it out. More generally, audio is the human preferred input to AIs, but vision, images, animations, video is the preferred output from them. Around a third of our brains are massively parallel processors dedicated to vision. It is a 10-lane superhighway of information into brains. As AI improves, I think we'll see a progression that takes advantage. Right, so raw text, hard, effortful to read. Second, markdown, bold, italics, blah, blah, blah. HTML, and this is the current default. HTML, still procedural with underlying code, but a lot more flexibility on the graphics, layout, even interactivity. Early but forming new good default, 4, 5, 6. And then potentially sometime in the future, we have interactive neural videos simulations. So you see there is a foreseeable progression from raw text to kind of interactive videos and simulations which we can consume. And I would agree, I'm not a neuroscientist, etc., but I think this is true, that images and specifically videos are very much information dense, and you can consume that actually very lightly as humans. So even though there is a lot of information, we just suck it in because this is our environment, obviously. And so we are very well in this to process this information. So you could even argue that the internet as of now, with its HTML pages and hero and sections, is kind of a very kind of Stone Age way of presenting information, just because it was not otherwise possible. But you see, there is a progression, and I also see that coming. So we have to admit that, okay, now we are at the markdown space. Now we are getting into HTML, and why not thinking, just scenarios on how that could work in the future. The extrapolation through the technology doesn't exist just yet, ends in some kind of interactive videos generated directly by a diffusion neural net. Many open questions as to how exact procedural software 1.0 artifacts like interactive simulations may be woven together with neural artifacts, diffusion grids, but generally something in the direction of recently viral, which is now this one I showed before. There are also improvements necessary and pending at the input. Audio, nor text, nor video alone are not enough. For example, I feel a need to point gesture to things on the screen, similar to all the things you would do with a person physically next to you and your computer screen. So he's even arguing that it's obviously not only about consuming the information and, let's say, maybe using your keyboard or your voice, but it's more like a full interaction, even with our hands and maybe with our mimic, and how we are as a full person and interact with systems like that. TLDR, the input-output mind meld between humans and AIs is ongoing, and there is a lot of work to do and significant progress to be made, way before jumping all the way into Neuralink-esque BCIs and all that. For what's worth exploring at the current stage, hot tip, try ask for HTML. Yeah, obviously one version of it is just that we plug the brain directly into a computer system with a Neuralink-esque kind of thing. But yeah, why not try out HTML? So yeah, that was my point of this video. I hope you liked it. If you like content like that, consider subscribing it. And I'm curious if you already use HTML as kind of a format, information dense format for interacting with LLMs. So enjoy your day, have a good day, and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.